sent it to you. I don't know if thank you. My bandwidth is probably not enough to handle that if anything changes here in the next few minutes. So awesome. All right, we're going to get started here. And, a lot of people will ask me, you know, what do I do? How do I close this? What do you say? And for me, it doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like it's magic or anything else. I guess I've been doing it for such a long time, but I've studied under some real masters, millionaires and billionaires and people that have just been incredible when it came to sales and closing techniques. With my team, when I'm out closing, my closing ratio is about 90%, which is about three times, I think, the normal or twice the normal for real estate agents. And I just have found that some of the things that I've done intuitively, I can share because when I shared those with my team started doing that. They started learning some different techniques and their closing ratios went up as well. So we're going to dive in. According to the National Association of Realtors, agents who master verbal closing techniques see a 32% higher closing rate than those don't. And here's the sad part. The average closing ratio for real estate agents is around 20%. It says top performing agents with advanced skills, 45 to 55%. So I guess that's half the people. And I don't know, maybe I just got all the soft and easy ones, but mine was about 90%. So for many years. So we're going to cover some top verbal techniques, a little bit of NLP principles, reflective listening, the money triangle, etc. And I was looking at a transaction that an agent, Sarah, did, and she actually, when she focused on increasing her verbal techniques and some of these closing techniques, she increased her commissions by about $87,000 a year. On my team, Trevor went from 50,000 to 150,000. So there's a lot that can be done here. So there's a number of different closing techniques that agents and we like to use. And so I'm glad that Eric is recording this because that way we can reach out and get a copy of this and go over it again because I'm going to hit it pretty quick. So an assumptive close. Now, a lot of people, they're looking at, what does an assumptive close mean? Well, it's just like when you're asking a girl out on a date. It means you're speaking as if the decision has already been made. Of course, you're going out with me. What would you like to do when we go out on Wednesday night or Thursday or whatever? So you speak as if this decision has already been made. And there is a group called The Close, which focuses on closing techniques, etc. And they found that assumptive language can increase closing probability by about 38%. So an example would be, again, when would you like to schedule the move-in date versus, do you want to buy this house? So we're assuming, right, that they're going to buy this house and they're going to close. So another example would be, Mike's working with his indecisive first-time buyer, and he's been doing this for 6 months. I'm sure you can identify with this. After switching to assumptive language like, which one of these three neighborhoods would you work best for your commute? Instead of, do you like any of these neighborhoods? He closed within the next 2 weeks. So you can practice by, converting hesitant questions into assumptive statements. I like to, let me rephrase that. I've always said, when they don't have an opinion, give them one. All right. And so we like to give them an opinion. So then you have the alternative close. And so these are things you can work at. Like I said, again, I would get a copy of this video. Eric will share it and go over these techniques and pick one or two and then start mastering those. So the alternative choice close would be where you present two positive options rather than a yes/no scenario, right? So it's kind of a take on the assumptive close. So according to the Sales Benchmark Index, alternative choice questions increase closing rates by 44% compared to yes/no questions. So you don't want to be an agent that says yes/no. would you like to live here? Would you like to do this? No, it's, well, we can make an offer on this house or we can make an offer on that house. No alternative choice, right? Either one's a good thing. They're going to close on a house. We're going to get paid. They're going to be happy and stop worrying about, finding the right house, I guess. Or you could say something like, even, would you prefer to close at the end of the month or the 15th versus you want to close on this property? The second one is really lame. And I know I've used the lame close in the past when I was starting out. So Jennifer's, struggling with a couple who couldn't decide on a particular property. And instead of asking if they wanted to make an offer, she asked, would you be more comfortable with a 30-day closing period or an extended 45-day close to give you more time to prepare? Well, of course, they chose the 45 days, but they signed the contract that day because they're worried, right? And so she said, would you like 30-day close, the standard 30-day, or would you like the extended 45-day? The key point is that both options lead to the same result, and that is closing the deal, okay, closing the transaction. Now, there's the summary close. So the summary close, we're recapping all the benefits and positive aspects before asking for a commitment. Now, National Association of Realtors research, which I pulled a lot of data. I pull data from all over the country when I do these classes. And I've taught these classes to investor associations in Utah, Maine, Seattle, across the country, on television a couple of times, and on radio. And so I like to pull out as much data as I can because the truth is the truth no matter where it's at. So when we're summarizing, we recap all the benefits and positive aspects before asking for a commitment. So research says, again, NAR, says that clients remember only 20% of what you tell them by the next day, okay? So if you told them 5 things, they're going to remember 1 thing. So that makes summaries critical. And so agents that use summary, closes have about 27% fewer need to think about it responses, which is always the dreaded one, need to think about it, right? So let me give you an example. An example would be, this property gives you the 3 bedrooms you wanted, the school district you prioritize, and stays within your budget. Shall we move forward with the paperwork? So, summarized what was important to the buyer there. And so there's another one. Okay, Carlos specializes in luxury properties, but he faced constant delays from clients. And so after implementing a structured top 5 benefits summary before asking for a commitment, his average time to close decreased from 47 to 23 days, which is actually quite a difference when we're talking about closing. And so it's something that we'll give you these tools. Pick one, do the first one, pick the second one, go hit the second one, master that, do the third one, etc. Practice on your wife, practice on your children. It's something that you can do where it becomes intuitive. And I think one of the members of my team, Keith, asked me once, he says, Randall, how come we're going in and we're closing about half of the deals and you're closing almost all of it? And I said, well, part of it is because I study this. The second thing is something that I wanted to share with you, and that is I assume success. I go in assuming success, and I am surprised, truly surprised if I don't close. When I meet with somebody, if I don't close them and walk out with a contract in hand, I'm surprised. I make that assumption that I am going to succeed. Eric, go ahead.
Hey, just really quick, I had somebody just text me asking to be let into the meeting.
Let's see here. Let's see here. And suspense. I'm not seeing them. Give me a second here, Aaron. No, I don't see it. What if they've got the right? I wonder if they got the right one.
Okay.
Let me look here. Okay, here it is. Oh, there's a bunch. I don't know why it was not pulling up, but all of a sudden I got 15.
Oh boy. Okay.
So that is, and Eric, I'm going to make you the host, if that's okay. Would you be
Yeah, I'll
okay with
keep an eye
that?
on that. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. All right. All right. And okay. Perfect. And you guys can still see my screen, right? Hoping.
I don't see your screen right now. I just see the group of everyone here.
Okay, maybe allow me to share. Oh, send request. I just sent you the request.
I can see your screen, Randall.
Okay. All right. We got it. And if you can't see the screen now, um, let me know. Okay. So the urgency clause. All right. Here is something I want to talk to you about here. So I will send a copy of this to, I think I've sent one to Jake, but I'll make sure Jake has a copy of this so you can have a copy of the notes here as well. But the urgency clause is where we ethically create a sense of time pressure when it's appropriate, of course. Properties marked with legitimate scarcity close, two times faster on average, just because everybody's got FOMO, right? They don't want to miss out. Everybody's afraid they're going to miss out. And so when we're looking at trying to end my sharing here, and I think, am I back, Eric? Where we got just me? Good. I only see Randall. Okay, that's perfect. So basically, we want to create that sense of fear of missing out on an urgency clause. So here's an example. We've got two other interested parties looking at this property tomorrow. Now, only say that if it's true. We don't ever lie because you know what? God knows, but more, I wouldn't say more importantly, I'd say perhaps as obvious is the fact is when you're not telling the truth, people tend to look down and to the left. People can tell where you're not telling the truth, right? So if somebody else is looking, you can tell them that. So here's an example. So during the hot market, here in Salt Lake, Becky, she informed her clients about multiple scheduled showings for a property they love, but they're hesitating on it. And so she specifically mentioned, hey, the seller's reviewing offers tomorrow at 5 p.m. This is transparent urgency. So letting the clients know, hey, they're going to review offers at 5 p.m. If we put an offer in, we have a chance, even in this hot market. If you don't put an offer in, we're not going to get anything. And so it helped our clients make the decision. They actually were the offer that was chosen as the property had three competing offers. Theirs was the best. But again, I want to issue this warning. Always maintain honesty and ethical standards. All right. That's something that I can't speak to enough. If you tell the truth, you're going to be much happier. God's going to love you. And, you're not going to have problems with the division of real estate. I mean, that's just it. So, the next thing I want to talk about here, so we're covering a lot of stuff here. We're fire hosing it today, but it's neuro-linguistic programming in closing. All right. So NLP, you guys have heard about it. It's been around for a long time. I used to do it when I would walk up on stage. There'd be a chair up there. I'd walk behind the chair and I'd say, if Donald Trump, this is back when he was doing the art of the deal and, whatnot. If Donald Trump was sitting in this chair, and I'd pat the back of the chair, right? I said, if he was sitting in this chair and talking about real estate, do you think it would be important to listen to him? And, half the audience is nodding their head. Yeah, it would be important. And then I walk around the chair and I sit down in it. Okay. And I've assumed Donald Trump's role as the master of real estate. But it's a big deal. It's important to understand NLP because so let me talk about what NLP is, because some of you haven't ever heard of it before. So, and if you have any questions, just go ahead and speak out here. Neurolinguistic programming is the study of how language affects our neurological processes and behavior patterns. And it was developed in the 1970s by Richard Bandler and John Grinder, who studied the patterns of successful therapists and communicators. And they found out that they had some things in common. So a core principle was that communication operates at both the conscious and the unconscious levels, right? And this is why it's effective in real estate, because agents who use NLP, they're trained in NLP techniques, according to NAR, have a 34% higher client satisfaction score. According to a journal, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to take a drink here. My tongue's getting tight on me. I get so excited about NLP. So there was a study done in the Journal of Behavioral Psychology, and it says that 93%, which some of us knew is 90%, of communication impact comes from nonverbal and paraverbal elements that NLP specifically addresses. So here's a real world example. So the Martinez Group, they implemented, this is a small brokerage, NLP training for their 37 agents. Within 3 months, their average days to close decreased from 47 to 28 days, while their contract to closing ratio improved by 41%. So that's quite a bit more money. The managing broker, Martinez, attributed this directly to improved client trust and more effective objection handles. So it's got to be used inside of an ethical framework. That NLP techniques should always be used ethically. We want to help clients make decisions that truly benefit them. We're not trying to manipulate them. We're trying to help get them past the fear stage, the indecision stage, I'm just like so nervous about signing anything stage. So some of the techniques with NLP that are easy to use that anybody else can use are matching and mirroring. So let me talk about that. So there's some science behind this technique. So based on neurolinguistic programming, these principles, it recognizes that people trust those who are similar to themselves. Like, we go to church because, whatever church we chose, typically we go to that church because we like the people there. We trust them. They're like us. If I go to a group with a lot of real estate agents or investors, I go there because those are my people, right? They're my peeps. I recognize them. I know what motivates them, and I feel comfortable in their presence. So based on these principles of people trusting those who are like themselves, we can create this unconscious connection through the like attracts like principle. So NLP activates mirror neurons in the brain that foster empathy and connection. And matched communication, meaning that you're matching the other person. We have that good connection there on a neuron level. It increases agreement rates all the way up to about 67%. It's powerful. I spent a whole year working on this. Anya Bartholomew is really good at it. She used to teach it. There's a lot of NLP that can be used very effectively. So here's some elements that you can match and mirror. So vocal patterns. You guys have heard me talk about this before. The speaking pace, okay? That means you're going to match their tempo. If they talk fast, you talk fast. If it's moderate or measured, then you talk more moderately or measured or slowly. You match their volume, their energy level. So volume is typically energy level. And you got to maintain professionalism, of course. And we're not going over the top on this, but tone and pitch reflect the communication style, whether they're enthusiastic, analytical, logical thinkers, etc. And breathing patterns, there's subtle synchronization can create a deeper rapport, just like if they go, so I do that. I do a lot of deep breaths. Key patterns, key language patterns, so key phrases of vocabulary they repeatedly use. It's okay to reflect that back to them. So if it's a visual communication style, they'll say something like, I see what you mean, that's visual, right? They're seeing. If they say, I hear what you're saying, that's auditory. And if it's kinesthetic, that means I feel like this is right. This feels good. Something to that effect. They're going to see visual be some form of seeing, hearing some form of hearing, and then kinesthetic is basically feeling oriented. So that's a good thing that to do is repeat that back to them. So if they say, I feel like, like now is maybe, a time I should be really careful. And you can say, I understand how you feel. I feel like you're correct. And I feel like we can mitigate the risk that might be part of what we're feeling at this time to where it's not such a big deal and we're taking care of the downsides it could possibly. So that makes sense. So you want to use professional versus casual speech patterns. If they're using professional patterns, you don't want to be a slob. But pay attention to whether they're using formal language. So if they're saying, I would like to inquire about versus, hey, so what's the deal with? That's pretty casual, right? For most agents, I would say maintain a lean towards the professional side on that, but it's okay to meet those people, come, 60% or 70% of the way they're at. And so, you can adapt your formality level to match, but remain slightly more professional. So if they're laid back, so hey, what's the deal with whatever, you would say, okay, here's the deal with this transaction. Let me lay it out for you, something like that. Keller Williams Training did a lot of studies and research, and they found that matching speech formality levels alone improved rapport, according to their data, by 47% and increased the closing rates by 23%. So let me give you some examples. So corporate executives, right? There might be the property offers excellent, return on investment potential with a projected 7.8% cap rate based on market conditions today. If you've got young first-time buyers, we're not going to say that to them. We're going to say, something that's going to be a little different, which would be like, hey, this place gives you serious bang for your buck, and the neighborhood is really coming up, meaning that you should build equity in this property fairly quickly. So there was an agent that I read about named Diane, she's in Beverly Hills. I don't think I'd like to deal in that market, but anyway, she is struggling with this tech entrepreneur client who seemed pretty disengaged. She just couldn't seem to get him to connect. And she's like, I'm pretty, I'm well-spoken, etc. But after noticing his casual, abbreviated communication style, right, she shifted from her typical formal presentation to a more direct, casual language with tech references. So she got more casual because the client was more casual. And the client told her, she said, you're the first agent who doesn't sound like a robot. And he purchased a $4.2 million property. So it does work. Now, there's technical versus simplified terminology. Again, I'm going to refer you back to this video afterwards so you can listen to it a couple of times. We're out walking. I think I saw Andrew walking. It's always a good thing to be walking and learning. I think that you anchor things, you retain more than 20% when you're walking and you're listening to information and educational materials. So I would encourage you to do that. So technical versus simplified terminology. So let's use a detection message. So we're going to use early questions to gauge real estate knowledge levels, right? So vocabulary mirroring. Notice if your clients are using specific terms like LTV ratio, that's that we all know, or amortization versus down payment or monthly payments, that's good to know, and we can respond in kind. And it's important because Reology found that 72% of clients felt uncomfortable when agents used agent terminology because they didn't understand it. Like agents will ask me, so what, designation should I get? None. There's only one designation that counts, SOLD. Okay, if you can close, it's great. And I say that tongue in cheek. If there's some designation that you feel is going to give you more confidence, go for it. But people don't know about GRI, CRS. They don't know about any of this stuff. They don't care. The only people that know about that is your broker and other real estate agents. No clients aware of that. So make sure you're speaking to them, speaking on a level they can understand. And according to the same study, 64%, so more than half the people felt patronized when real estate agents, experts were oversimplifying, concepts that they comprehended. So you have to, we're going to calibrate this technique. So start with mid-level terminology, okay? And then just and adjust based on their response. So I could talk about, the ROI, cap rates and et cetera. You might say, there's a return on investment, which is basically, and you might explain it to them and see how they take that. It's basically we invest $100,000, we're getting $1,000 a month. That's a 12% return on investment. So you can use a dual translation approach, which is you're presenting information in both technical and simplified terms. I would probably start with that personally because a lot of times, I might be pretty good at quizzing people up without them knowing they're being quizzed up. But if I present the information, both technical and simplified terms, when their knowledge level is unclear, I'll know pretty quick how I should be talking with these people, and I'll listen carefully to them. So, for example, let me give you examples. I always like examples. So, technical. This property has a superior HERS index rating of 62, indicating exceptional efficiency compared to similar homes in this area. So HERS rating is basically it's a rating as far as how green it is, how energy efficient it is, if it's going to stay warm in the winter and cool in the summer, et cetera. But here's a more simplified way. So this home is going to save you about $175 per month on utility bills compared to similar sized older homes in this neighborhood, right? So that's how you can use a dual translation approach. So there's this agent named Jason, and he lost a few tech industry clients. So we've got the Silicon Slopes, right? Down there in Utah County. And there's a lot of tech people down there. My nephew is one of them, and I actually hooked him up with one of my agents to help buy a house who was really good, and he got the lingo for these tech guys. But anyway, he was losing several clients until he created a tech professional property analysis. So what he did is he formatted something that included technical specifications and data-driven comparisons because tech industry people are big into tech, right? So his closing rate increased from about 17% to 46% because he was speaking their language. He was giving them data. These people like data because that's their day-to-day living. They love it. And so that's important. And let me say one thing about mirroring, and I'm going to call it the 7-second rule. So they've done some studies that show that if you mirror, like if I sigh and you sigh right away, then it looks like you're making fun of me, right? But they've shown that if you wait between 5 and 9 seconds, with 7 seconds being optimal, people don't notice. You can mirror them without a problem. And that's a big deal. We want to mirror them, but we don't necessarily want them to feel mirrored, right? We want them to feel rapport, like we're their peeps. We're talking to them. It's important. Like Eric, you can see him here. He's sitting back in his chair a little bit. Well, if I'm trying to meet with Eric and we're in the office, if he's leaning back, I'm going to lean back. It's just something, right? But I'm not going to do it right away. And if he crosses his legs, I'm not going to cross his legs till at least 7%, 7 seconds. Sorry, 7 seconds has passed. So it's something that's important. Let's talk about metaphors. So this is kind of good because yesterday was Easter, right? And Christ was probably the greatest teacher in history, and he used a lot of stories, etc. And a metaphor is a type of a story. So metaphors are linguistic tools where we express one concept in terms of another. So we're creating immediate understanding through comparison. So it transfers meanings from a familiar source to explain an unfamiliar target. So, for example, it'd be something like you're using a simile like or as. This home is your sanctuary versus this home is like a sanctuary, right? The average person uses about 6 metaphors a minute in natural speak. Now that's interesting. So you can try and count that, often unconsciously. I know that as Americans, I'm here, interacting with people from another country. Asians are very different. The average person uses 6 metaphors a minute. I don't quite catch that because, the language deal, but I'm starting to pay attention to more Americans and more expats and see how they speak. And let me tell you why this is important. So metaphors are powerful in real estate closing. So for example, I've had people say, now, Randall, I know that my house is only worth, 525,000, but I really want to list it at 575,000. Okay. And, I'm looking at the market and I know there's no way in heck they're going to sell at 575. I'll list it at 575. They're going to get disappointed in 30 days, want a new real estate agent, etc., because there's going to be no action on it. So I'm going to use a metaphor. I'm going to say, hey, you have a nice car out front. That Toyota is really nice. How much did you pay for it? 25,000. Great. And did you buy the first one you saw, or did you shop around a little bit? And they'll say, what the average person is going to say, well, we shopped around a little bit. So, I mean, how did you know it was a good price? Well, we shopped around, right? Or we looked it up on Kelley Blue Book, etc. And I would say to them, I'd say, okay, so you probably know people that have bought stocks as well, right? And you can always find out how much a stock is worth. Well, just like cars and stocks, we can find out what they're worth, because what's going to happen here is this time is just like that time. If people, when you were buying a car and you knew that you could buy a new Toyota for $25,000, probably more than that now, but $25,000, if you saw one for $35,000 or $40,000, would you bother looking at it? This time is just like that time. Or if you've ever bought stock and the going rate for, Intel stock is $100 a share and somebody's offering to sell it at $150, are you interested in buying stock at $150 a share? No, absolutely not. So you're going to transfer that meaning, right, from something familiar to explain something unfamiliar to them, which is the fact that listing your property high isn't a good idea. So neurological impact, so fMRI studies. So it's basically a study that has to do with metaphors and activating language and sensory brain regions simultaneously, create stronger memory encoding. So Christ would use that. It was important because you talk in metaphors, you tell stories because people remember those, right? Remember, we heard that the average client's going to only remember 20% of what we told them tomorrow. This is how we increase that low. Also, it's a memory bypass. So we're looking at, we bypass rational resistance by connecting directly to the emotional centers because people are more inclined to go with how they feel than what they think. Research from Princeton, which is one of my relatives was the CEO there. And so I've always liked Princeton, Princeton data. But it shows that metaphors reduce cognitive load. That means the amount of brain power it takes to process complex information by 32%. So if you're using metaphors, you're making it easy. And I like to say KISS, keep it simple, stupid, or press the easy button, etc., and reduce the cognitive load by 32% because people are processing a lot of complex information. If we can make it easy for them, the confused mind always says no, but if they understand it, they'll say yes. And so it helps facilitate decision-making as well. Berkeley found that presentations using strategic metaphors were 43% more persuasive when they surveyed those people afterwards than those that had identical information that was presented literally. So real-world evidence, a controlled study of 1,200 property listings, that's pretty good. That's over 1,000, right? Found that listings with appropriate metaphors received a 37% higher inquiry rate, sold for an average of 2.8% higher prices. So I kind of did this with a property in 2008. I went to close. The doctor couldn't close because at the closing table, Countrywide folded, right? And it was a bad deal. And I knew I wanted to unload this house that I had just remodeled. And so I was going to need to do something because there was a lot of houses on the market and people were taking big hits. And so it had a metal roof. It was up off a foothill. I said, this has a forever roof. You'll never have to worry about your roof ever again. At that time, tile, stone tile was really popular. And so I said, your feet will caress stones kissed by Tuscan gods, and you will feel like you're on Mount Olympus. And so I actually, did all those things. I said, you have a kitchen where Martha Stewart could hold a show, and she would be jealous of your kitchen. And I got a call that week from an attorney in Denver, because I marketed Denver as well as Salt Lake. And it's a female attorney. She says, I have to see the house where my feet will caress stones that were kissed by Tuscan gods, and Martha Stewart would be jealous of my kitchen. And I sold it to her a week later. So it does work. It's really a big thing. There's a lot of scientific research behind it. Again, Princeton Persuasion Lab found that metaphors increase retention of key points by 42% after 7 days. 42% better after 7 days compared to literal descriptions. Stanford mirrored that research and discovered that metaphors increase clients' confidence in decisions by 28% and reduced post-anxiety from decision making, because people are always worried about buyer's remorse, right? And so when we use metaphors, it helps with that. The Journal of Consumer Psychology, which focuses on the psychology of buying and selling, said that property descriptions using metaphors were perceived as 24 or 26%, not 24%, 26% more valuable than identical listings without metaphors. So you're getting the picture here. A picture is worth 1,000 words. So paint a verbal picture with these people. Harvard Business Review. So here we are with the whole Princeton League here. In sales context, well-chosen metaphors shorten the decision time by 38% compared to standard approaches. So if you're not using metaphors, start. Okay. So a large Century 21 franchise tested two versions of the same property presentations. So they did what they called their standard description versus metaphor enhanced descriptions. And the metaphor enhanced description resulted in 31% higher conversion rates from showing to offer, with clients reporting that the property made more sense to them. So they understand it. So try and choose metaphors. However, don't just pick one out of the blue that might be really esoteric. Let's try and keep it relative. So choose metaphors that connect to the client's profession, hobbies, or interests. If they're real estate investors, you can speak to that. If they're golfers, speak to that. If they're jumping stilt masters like Eric Lee, speak to that. All of those things. But it's important for teachers, for example, you'd say, hey, this neighborhood is like having the perfect classroom. Everything is organized exactly where you need it. Okay? Or healthcare workers. The home inspection process is similar to preventive medicine. We're going to identify the issues before they become serious problems, and we can take care of those. Engineers. That's always my toughest gig is engineers. They're the hardest ones for me to relate to. I do pretty good with them, but out of all the groups, that's my hardest. But the structure of this property is like a well-designed system, each component complementing the others for maximum efficiency. And then, you can take that and break it down into, sports enthusiasts, like interest-based examples. So, for example, you've got a sports enthusiast. Hey, buying in this development now is like getting ground floor season tickets to a team is going to the championships. Or if they're a cook, big in cooking, you could say this kitchen is the foundation of the home. Just like a great sauce is the foundation of an exceptional meal. Metaphors, right? Work on those, pick those out. Life stage examples, you can do them with life stage examples. Or like myself, I'm a new parent at 62. Hey, this floor plan works like a well-designed stroller. That's important. adaptable as your family grows and practical for everyday needs. Yeah, I like a well-designed stroller. I
So
bought two or
Randall,
three. Yeah.
since a lot of people in here might not be great writers, we have these cool tools that have come up in the last few years with Chat GPT or Grok or whoever you like to use. You can always throw those in there. They do stand out, however, if you don't personalize it. So if you just say, hey, write this for me, it, it kind of stands out that it didn't come from you, it came from a computer, and that actually is a little bit of a turnoff. So I do encourage you, get some help from those writing tools, but don't just copy and paste out of the writing tools. Tweak it a little bit. They can be used to give you great ideas, but make sure that your personality still comes through with it. Because yeah, if it feels artificial, it's a little bit of a turnoff still. Who knows where we'll be in the future, but for now, I think that's the feeling most people get. But you do have help out there. So if you're hearing Randall and you're thinking like I am, like I'm not that creative, I couldn't come up with these things. Kissed by the feet of a Tuscan god or whatever. I can never come up with that. But there are different tools that can help you with these things, and they're great ideas. And it's not beyond your reach because we do have some things that help us now.
Absolutely. That's absolutely a great point, Eric. And I was going to bring that up, and I guess I just got so into what I was doing here that I passed that up. But it's awesome. So I have written for a number of magazines that want like 1,500 to 2,000 words. Before I use different AIs. I use Jasper. I use Claude. I use a number of them. Before I use those, it would take me about 10 hours to do a 1,500 word article. Now I can do them in 2 to 3. And it's not that it's writing for me, but I can say, okay, this is what I want to convey. Here's the outline. And it helps me outline and it gives me some ideas. And then I go through and I write it because, like Eric said, don't let AI do it for you. It just doesn't work. It's going to sound canned. It's going to sound funny. But let AI give you some structure and say, hey, give me, 10 10 metaphors for, new parents, and then say, where I can say, okay, this floor plan is like, X for a new parent, and it'll come up with 10 different things. And then you can tweak those, right? Figure the one you like best, make it natural to you. So perfect, Eric. Thank you so much. That was awesome advice. I love that. I get so excited on this, and sometimes I don't realize or I don't think about the people might not be at the same level, but it's just, it's a big deal. So, yeah, empty nesters, just continuing on. Hey, this property is like a perfect weekend getaway bag. It has exactly what you need without the extra weight, right? I like that. When I'm traveling, it's always interesting. Like right now, we're checking on projects here in Nepal in the mountain region. I feel like I've got Atlas on my shoulders after the wife and baby are done packing in this huge bag. And so, that would work. That would resonate with me. So maybe here's an example. So Trevor, we've talked about Trevor in the past, but Trevor works with a surgeon. So he seems indecisive until Trevor restructured his presentation using surgical metaphors. He says, this home has excellent circulation between spaces, and renovation history shows precise intervention without unnecessary changes, which is, a little weird for me, but it's great. But he signed anyway because he said, you finally spoke my language, helped him understand, right? So there's a lot that we can use in there in that data process. And I could go on to metaphorical framing of the buying process, where, the client, we're guiding clients through exploring territories, discovering hidden gems and finding your destination, et cetera. Look in the notes, and I'll send that over to Eric, as Assistant Jake here. As soon as we're done, I'll make sure that he has a copy of this. I've got a copy of it here. And so it should be good. But remember the physical elements we talked about a little bit: body posture and positioning, leaning in versus, relaxed posture, hand gestures, movements, facial expressions, energy level during the conversation. Now, when I'm giving a seminar to a group of people, my natural speaking pace is about like this. But I have learned I had to use a metronome. The thing goes click, click, click. when you're practicing piano, to get me to speak faster, to up my tempo, because there's actually a lot more interest when the tempo is up versus slow. And you can talk slowly when you want to emphasize something. But body posture and positioning, hand gestures, facial expressions, energy level during the conversation, all important. And again, remember the 7-second delay rule. Basically it's, scientifically based for implementing behavior monitoring and mirroring without detection, right? The science behind it comes from social psychology, showing that immediate mirroring is often perceived as mockery or manipulation, right? They want to make fun of people or have them feel like it. While delayed mirroring creates unconscious report. So again, according to studies that I've read, the optimal time is 5 to 9 seconds, with 7 seconds showing the strongest rapport building effect. And so a landmark study in the Journal of Nonverbal Behavior found that subjects who used the 7-second delay were perceived as 61% more trustworthy than those who mirrored immediately. So if Eric leans forward, I lean forward immediately. Or if Eric leans forward as he's paying attention, and then I lean forward like this 7 seconds later, I'm going to be seen as, 61% more trustworthy, right? And on a neurological basis, 7 seconds allows the brain and mirror neurons to register similarity without triggering conscious pattern recognition. That's interesting. So we can register a similarity. We have that rapport. We're feeling alike, we're together, right? We're people together, we're peeps and that, but the brain is not going to mirror those neurons or register those neurons where it recognizes a conscious pattern recognition. So it's important. So you can count silently 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, whatever, before adapting the new pattern. But when the client leans forward, wait 7 seconds, or about, 5 to 9 seconds, and then gradually adopt a similar posture. It doesn't have to be 100% exact. Speech rate, when a client speeds up their speech pattern, you can begin your next sentence at a slightly, faster pace after a brief pause, right? So terminology, when clients use specific industry jargon, you can incorporate some of those similar terms yourself, the volume, follow the same volume that they do. So there was one example. Jessica recorded clients' interactions before and after learning the 7-second rule. And this is anecdotal, of course, but it was good enough that somebody put it in a magazine. And it showed that analysis, that before training, she mirrored too quickly, averaged about two seconds, causing 41% of the clients to show subtle discomfort signs. Okay? After implementing the 7-second rule, those negative reactions dropped to just 4%, and our closing ratio improved by 26%. So it's good. So detection and correction. So if a client seems to notice your matching behavior, directly break the pattern, right? Temporarily. And then go back to it after 10 or 12 seconds. Focus on less obvious elements, breathing patterns rather than exact gestures. So if I do this, you don't need to do this, but you can do or something like that, hand gestures, right? So master negotiators using the 7-second rule have a 38% less resistance when studied in price negotiations compared to those who just mirror erratically. So you want to make sure that you're mirroring using the 7-second rule. Practice that timer. You can do it in pairs. I've got an exercise in my guide here that I created. And I actually use AI to help me with some of this, because these classes, by the time I finish one of these, typing, using AI, using everything else to help me finding the data I want, I iterate. I have as many as 30 iterations. So it's not uncommon for me to go through 30 different attacks using AI to do a presentation, whether I'm speaking to you guys or the Investor Association or something else. I have to know about NLP. I have to know about It's not going to do that for me. I have to know about mirroring, assumptive closes, etc. Um, to make it work. That's why you need to attend. You can't attend seminars, attend classes like this, but AI can help you, especially if you're just starting out, something like that. Um, and so you can, we want to anchor positive emotions. So when people feel like, um, if people feel positive about something, fear will motivate people. 80% of people run away from things they're afraid of versus 20% that move towards pleasure. However, if you can connect positive feelings to a property, right? Not positive feelings to you, the person centered, but to the property, anchor them to the property. Like I anchored the whole Donald Trump thing on the chair when I talked about it, put my hands on it, and then sat in his chair, making, anchored that Donald Trump feeling. So they're looking at me like Donald Trump, right? Probably not, but that's how it works in theory. So if you said, imagine waking up to this view every morning while they're experiencing positive emotions. And so, you can practice, creating anchoring statements. Um, that's a big deal. And then let's see here. Reflective listening. I think I'm going to just tap on this really quickly here because we're running out of time. Active listening techniques. Maintain eye contact and an open posture. Don't go like this. Don't go like this. I'm cold all the time, so if you see my arms crossed, it's typically because I'm cold. But avoid interrupting. Use verbal affirmations. I understand. I see. Oh, I get it. Things like that. The Journal of Real Estate Practice and Education showed that agents who practiced active listening closed 41% more transactions annually than those who don't. So I don't know about you, but 41% is good. Listen, listen, listen. God gave you 2 ears so you could listen twice as much as you speak. And according to communication studies, we're only going to remember about 25 to 50% of what we hear. I think you're going to remember 20% of what we hear the first time. If you do it the second time, it's going to go up by probably 10 to 15% per time that you hear it. But that makes, reflective techniques essential for clarity. So that is something that I find truly important. And then I want to, I could spend another hour on this, but I promise I won't. One of the things I like to do is I like to think of the triangle, okay? The money triangle, right? If you're not sure, you're going to close somebody, you're trying to close somebody, you can tie all this in by using the money triangle. And here's the money triangle. At the top, we've got the trial close, all right? So can we sign the paperwork and get going, putting you into this house in this amazing neighborhood? That's a trial close, for example. And this is, you only need to use this for somebody who's pretty difficult. And they'll say, well, I've got a cousin, he's an agent and I probably should use him. Okay, so you have an objection that's over here in this part of the triangle. And then this side of the triangle is where you're answering those objections. And you say, I understand. I've got a cousin too. Um, most people have the majority of their wealth tied up in their home. Okay. I just sold my home for, $800,000. I had it paid off. That was pretty nice. I didn't mind that. And so they say they have a majority of their wealth tied up in their home. And when your home is so important to you that that it's the difference between somebody who doesn't have a home has 40 times less wealth at retirement than you'll have owning a home. Do you want somebody professional handling that like me, or do you want somebody who might take some shortcuts? They might say, oh, it's family, it's a friend, it's whatever, they'll be okay if I don't cross my T's and dot my I's. And sometimes they'll think, that's right. Okay, I'll sign with you. I've actually had that happen maybe once. But then they'll say, oh, but I feel bad about cousin Jake. And I'll say, well, how about if I do this? And again, so I trial close second time. They came up feeling bad. So I'll say, if we can make you feel really good, I will give cousin Jake 30% of what I make as a commission just for being your cousin and just because you love. And you won't have to do anything, and you'll still get the best person available to handle this transaction. And you just keep going around and around and around. But it's called the money triangle. So at the top, you've got trial closes. On the side, you have objections or concerns. And the third, you have remediation, which is basically you're answering the questions. And he goes back up to a trial close. So it's so important. I'm open for, got 3 minutes left. I'm open for any questions. Also, Eric, would you maybe mention again about tomorrow's thing, since we have like 15 people more on here?
Yeah, of course. So guys, hopefully you saw the training calendar. Hopefully you're getting the weekly emails. The weekly email comes out every Monday morning, so you should have all received that with a link. I swear every week or every other week, I'll find it in my spam. So it just keeps wanting to go back there. Make sure you're checking your spam or promotions folder, that you're getting that. It's got links into everything that we're doing. Tomorrow, again, we've got a live meeting in Salt Lake at the Larry Miller campus. What is that? Salt Lake Community College? Anyways,
Yep.
The address is in there, 9 o'clock, and it's a CE class where we're going over seller financing. So not only will you get some CE credits, that's good. They're free for you, and you need those to renew your license. So there's a lot of good things happening with that, and we would love to see more of you there. We want to make this a continual thing where we're doing a live meeting once a month in Salt Lake, but we need more participation. So there's that. I was going to dovetail a little bit on what Randall just said there. When I've dealt with somebody who has a family, because honestly, who doesn't have a family member in real estate these days, right? It seems like everybody knows somebody in real estate. And that's one of our most common objections. Well, I've got a friend or I've got a family member, and yet you're sitting there with them. Why are you sitting there with them doing a presentation if they've got a friend or family member? They're practically telling you, I don't want to hire my friend or family member, but I feel this obligation to them. Can you help me get over this obstacle? Like otherwise you wouldn't be being interviewed at all, right? And so when they do that, rather than giving them 30%, like Randall said, because most of the public don't know that like a 25% referral fee is standard. So I'll say, you know what? Do you feel like I would be the best one for the job? Because I know a lot of people have friends or family members, but maybe they're not full-time. And that's a pretty safe statement. And if you're part-time, then yeah, that might be used against you. You probably know that, right? But about 80% of agents are part-time. This isn't their full-time gig. And so that's one way to address it right away. And I say, you know, if you probably want somebody that's full-time, you want somebody that specializes here. For example, I've got cousins that are really good builders, but they're 2 counties away. I can't use them to build here because the traveling, it's just not worth it for them. I'm going to get maybe one of their crews at best, but I'm not going to get my cousin, you know, I'm going to get the secondhand help. So if you're feeling that way, one of the things that I can do to help you still have good relationships with your cousin is I can give them $500 or $1,000. It's way different than 30% of the commission. They don't have to lift a finger. It's kind of your way of acknowledging them, and it's going to help them out. And you make sure that you have the person that you think is best suited for this, one of your most important transactions that you'll ever do in your life, right? Because the last thing that you want is somebody that's part-time or 2 counties away who then kind of messes up the transaction or doesn't give you the service that you need. And then you really have strained relationships for the rest of your life when you see this person, you know, at Thanksgiving or whatever. And so we can avoid all of that with this simple solution. So I love what Randall said today. Randall, thank you so much for your training. Do you guys have any questions or comments or anything for Randall before we go?
I think it's good. I just sent this over to just send it over to Jake here. The outline.